ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So we were discussing the question of free will and the will of God. So the conversation was taking place at Shampukur house, where Sri Ramakrishna was conversing with devotees, including Girish Ghosh and Dr. Sarkar and many others. There was M also, of course, he was recording the whole conversation. So the topic which was being discussed was knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knower. These are the threefold impulse to action. Jnana, Jnata, and Gyeya. These are in Sanskrit. What do we mean by any perception is that there is a perception and a resultant knowledge. Then there is an object of knowledge and the knower. These three things are necessary for knowledge for the whole process of perception. So, how do we know a thing? There is a thing existing outside of us, an object of knowledge. There is somebody who is a subject, the person who is trying to know. And in between, connecting the two, there is the knowledge. So, when there is a connection, then you can say that a thing is being known, and the person who knows it is the subject of knowledge. There is a subject, there is an object of knowledge, and the knowledge which connects them. So, these are the threefold impulse to any action. So, any action is a reaction to certain things that you see outside. So, Sri Ramakrishna is now telling Sri Ramakrishna, you have to have some kind of faith to take up any work. The question that was being discussed is, what is our duty? Very often, you will find that this idea of duty confuses a lot of people. Some people think that this is my duty, some people believe that this is not my duty. The same thing, suppose a family in a family there are two children. So one of the children may feel that it is his duty to serve the parents, whereas the other child may not have that same feeling. So the idea of duty varies with different people. That is what we have observed. So it is very important to understand the concept of duty. In fact, Swamiji goes to the extent that a true spiritual sadhaka has no duty. As Sri Krishna says, I have absolutely no duty. He works without any attachment. He works with only with the intention of acquiring freedom. If that is the goal of life, then there is no problem. There is no question of what is your duty, what is not your duty. But still, as a working principle, one has to know till one becomes fully convinced that God alone is the doer and I am just an instrument. That is what Girish Ghosh asked Sri Ramakrishna. He said, I can't do japa. You get it done through me. I can't promise you anything. Then Sri Ramakrishna told him, you give me the power of your attorney, power of attorney. That's a legal term. When somebody cannot fight a case, cannot go to the court, he gives the power of attorney to a lawyer or to some other person. And that person can do everything on behalf of his client. The person who gives his power of attorney, he doesn't have to worry. So Sri Krishna asked Girish, if you can't do japa, if you can't do sadhana, then can you do one thing? You give me the power of attorney. I'll do everything for you. But it has to be total. Then you can't say, I will do this, I will do that. Girish Ghosh thought it was very easy. That if I just give the power of attorney to Sri Krishna, then I don't have to worry. But then, whenever out of ego, he used to say, I will go there or I will go that, go here. Sri Ramakrishna used to correct him, said, don't say I will go because you have given up the power of attorney. Says Sri Ramakrishna will make me go. Sri Ramakrishna will make me to do all these things. So it is not my duty, but it is coming to me unasked for, and I have to do it because it is Sri Ramakrishna's will. I have, I get certain things in life. I have to suffer certain things of in life, and I do it with the sense. I mean, I believe that it is Sri Ramakrishna or the person to whom you have given your power of attorney, that it is his problem, and he will do whatever is necessary. Whenever it is necessary to take any steps, he will do it. So, unless we reach that state where we totally surrender to the will of God, we still have to do our duties because we have that ego, we have that feeling that it is my duty. So, that's why Sri Ramakrishna says, you have to have some kind of faith to take up any work. You think of your objective, you think of your objective and take pleasure from that. After doing that, each one thinks, oh, I have done my duty, and he gets pleasure from that, or even while doing the duty. So the question was the argument between Girish Ghosh and, if we see the last conversation, Girish Ghosh believed that it is because you like it, you are doing that duty. Whereas Dr. Sarkar believed, who was Dr. Mahendra Lal Sarkar believed that it's not just the pleasure. I do it because it is to be done. But how can you explain? There are many things we would like to do, but only those things which give us pleasure, we do that. So you think of your objective and take pleasure from that. Only then you will do the work. Then Sri Krishna has to explain this complex idea of duty. So he gives an example. Suppose there is a metal jar full of gold coins buried in the ground. First, you have to know about it, that it is there. When will you desire certain things? When you know its value, when you know that it is a desirable thing, and then you go after it. And then, if you don't know that there is something which you have to achieve, or you can achieve certain things by doing certain things, then you don't try to achieve it, then you don't try to do it. So for every action, first Sri Krishna says there has to be a knowledge of the thing, that it is there. When you think of the jar, what happens? Suppose you know that you're not very sure that there is a metal jar full of gold coins buried under the ground. There may be snakes. So in that case, you will not dig. If somebody tells you that there might be big snakes, I know there are big snakes inside. If the moment you dig, maybe there will be some kind of hole through which some snakes might appear. They might bite you. So people are afraid. If there is no guarantee that you will feel pleasure, then you may not dig. But when you know for certain that there is a jar full of golds and these gold coins are worth having, then you think of the jar and you feel pleasure. You have not seen the jar. So Sri Krishna says it, the idea of duty develops in different stages. Then you begin to dig. Then you start hesitantly. You know somebody has told you that there is a jar full of gold coins. Then suddenly you hear a metallic sound, and that makes you more happy. Oh, then all my effort is now bearing fruit. So then the side of the jar becomes visible and you become still happy. In this way, your happiness gradually increases. Then he gives an example. Standing on the veranda of the temple, I have seen sadhus preparing to smoke hemp and anticipating the joy. So it's not just by doing that you get joy, even by anticipating the joy from past experience. I told you about the vritti of smriti. The old smriti reminds us, the old habit reminds us, or the old samskara, which is tendency. They produce in our mind a tendency of pleasure or pain based on our past experience. If we know that coins are, we had an experience maybe in our previous life or in this life that golden coins are desirable because that fetch you wealth, that help you to live a comfortable life. So just by knowing there is a jar, we have to know that there is a jar which contains gold, then you feel happy. The nearer you go, the moment you touch, when you start digging and hear the sound, then you feel happy. But when you really see it, oh, this is the jar which is full of gold, then your happiness increases. So, but the doctor gives an argument. He says, yes, it is true. But does pleasure, if it gives you pleasure, maybe there will be pain involved in that later on. Now it may give you pleasure because you have a wrong idea of pleasure. What he says is correct. He says, but fire emits, doctor says, fire emits both heat and light. You are able to see the light, but the moment you touch it, the heat burns your feet. When you do your duty, it is not just that you get pleasure out of it, it can also bring trouble. So, Dr. Sarkar seems to be very shrewd. He says it's not just the pleasure. Maybe you think there will be pleasure. That is how people go after the things of the world. They never believe that money will bring them sorrow. They never think that uh, the possessions of so many things will involve some trouble as well. They think the thing which we aspire, like uh, in Kathopanishad, as I very often, Shreya and Preya approach human beings. So the pleasure principle is not always, does not always guarantee that there will be happiness. Sri Ramakrishna is not referring to that. He is just saying these are the motives for our actions. Our actions are motivated by our desires. And the desire or the thought that getting certain objects, achieving certain objectives, doing certain actions, as which we call as duty, if it gives us pleasure, then it can also give us trouble. So the doctor seems to tell this. So M then says to Girish, M is also sitting there, but he is telling Girish, when your stomach is filled with food, your back can bear the load. There is pleasure even in trouble. So what exactly M was trying to say is he is a student of logic. So he seems to be telling that when you put something in your stomach, definitely the body has to bear the load. You can't feel light when you have eaten a lot. When your stomach is filled, it is, unless it gets digested. There may be a pleasurable sensation when you are eating, but then your body, your stomach has to bear the load. But M says God has created our body or our human beings in such a way that He has also created the spine and the back which can bear the load of the food, and somehow He can manage it. So, even if there is trouble, but the extra weight is there, some pleasure is there, and somehow you can manage it. Then Girish tells the doctor, duty is dry. So he says duty is dry because he has surrendered everything to the Lord. See, you have to see the psychology of Girish here. He doesn't feel that he has any duty because it is Sri Ramakrishna who is deciding what he should be doing, what he should not be doing. He has given the power of attorney. He is a great devotee. He has given the power of attorney to his guru and he is relaxing. So he doesn't want to do anything with the idea of a duty. He just goes on doing whatever things come to him because he knows whatever Sri Krishna wills. If I've given the power of attorney, it is his lookout. What is good for me, what is not good for me. So Girish says, I don't do anything because it is my duty, because duty is dry. According to Girish, duty is dry because he has surrendered everything to Thakur. Then the doctor says, why so? Then Girish says, okay, then it must be juicy. That means it may not be dry, it may be juicy. Then you be happy with your idea of duty. So, in fact, This idea of duty changes. While all this conversation is going on between Girish, M, Sri Ramakrishna is just observing. Later on, he will make his own comments. He will make his own wonderful comments. But he is now just listening to the different opinions. Not that any one opinion is correct. From their standpoint, different standpoints, all the three are stating their viewpoints. So Girish says, okay, if you don't think it is dry, then think it is juicy. So all laugh. Then M says, very good, beautiful. You take a bitter pill in the hope of something spicy later on. Now M seems to be giving another logic. He says, yes, sometimes you may not eat, you may not take medicine, a bitter pill, because even if it is bitter, you take it. It doesn't give you immediate pleasure. But the idea of pleasure, that this pill will cure me, this medicine will cure me. So that's why some people, though pleasure may not be a motive for every action, they do it and thinking that something spicy I will get. If I get cured, then I will be able to eat whatever I like. Right now, doctors are not permitting me to eat. But I take the bitter pill with the hope that I can eat whatever I like. So I will get some pleasure, though now I have to take the medicine. Even if it is bitter, it is not giving me pleasure while I take that medicine. I have to bear it. So also he says, our duties are also like that. People think if they have a family, if they have children, they don't mind having two, three, four children because they feel the duty, then they feel that they have their duty towards all the children. They have to educate them, they have to look after them. But they take the pain of doing all that because they feel that they will get something spicy, in the sense the bitter pill will give something spicy. As M said, the parents feel that now it may be very hard work to educate and but someday or the other in future we can relax and the benefits of educating the children will come back to us. So with that fond hope, of course many times it doesn't happen, and very often it doesn't happen that one realizes the harsh truth of life. But anyway, the idea is that no matter how much troublesome it is to rear children, you do it as a duty because M says we take the bitter pill of samsara. Some people say no, it doesn't matter if I have to take the bitter pill because I will get something spicy, and he hopes that uh, the thing which he is doing as duty will help him to get something wonderful later on. Now, then Girish tells the doctor, "You must feel that duty is pleasant. Why else would you do it?" Now, Girish doesn't seem to agree with what M says. He says, "You must feel that duty is pleasant. Otherwise, why will you do it?" Then the doctor says, no, pleasant, whether it is pleasant or not, I still do it because my mind is inclined that way. So there is no end to the argument. Now we have to wait to see what Sri Ramakrishna is going to tell now. Now the doctor is giving his own opinion. He simply does not want to believe Girish's idea that it is only because you get pleasure by doing that action that you consider it as a duty and you do it. But he says, no, I may not get pleasure, as M pointed out, that taking a bitter pill is not a pleasant thing. It does not give me pleasure right now. But still, M says the anticipation of pleasure you will get after getting cured will make you do that. So in any case, it is the pleasure motive that makes you do certain things as duty. If it doesn't make you happy, you will never do it. That's the idea. So M tells Girish, your nature pulls you to it, and everybody laughs. If it is the inclination of your nature, where does free will come in? So M is telling Girish that it is Prakriti which is making you do everything. He has heard Sri Krishna tell many times that when somebody asked why people do evil actions, then as Gita says, it is because of our own prakriti, because of the way combination of rajas, sattva and tamas. We do certain things and we are helpless. As Duryodhana says, Janami dharmam nachame pravrutti, Janami adharmam nachame nivrutti. Not that Duryodhana did not know. He was taught by the same guru who taught Pandavas. Dronacharya taught both Pandavas and Kauravas. So they were taught things, they were taught the scriptures which told them what is dharma, what is adharma. So Duryodhana tells Krishna, when Krishna says, why did you follow the path of adharma? So he pleads helplessness and he says, I know what adharma is. I know, but nachame nivrutti. I know what adharma is, but I can't help. I have to do it. I know what is dharma. Janami dharmam nachame pravrutti. Pravrutti means I can't help. I can't do it. I know what is dharma, but somehow I don't feel like doing it. So M is trying to tell Girish that it is not the free will. Your nature pulls you to do it. I mean, your prakriti, the combination of the gunas will make you choose the right thing or the wrong thing. If you side with your buddhi, as I told you, the faculty of manas is highly reactive. It doesn't know how to take decisions. It can just react, just as animals react. So we have to evolve and see that our buddhi becomes more active. Buddhi is the higher faculty of the mind, which can take the decisions between Shreya and Preya, that which is pleasant and that which is really good. So to decide that, you need a great amount of sattva. Only if a sattvic person will have the inclination to do certain things, good things, to choose the right thing. Then M is telling Girish, if it is the inclination of your nature, where does free will come in? So he says there is no such thing as free will. It is your nature which is forcing you to do. There was apparently speaking, if you see, or really speaking, you can see Duryodhana is saying, I don't have a free will. I was forced to fight this battle because my nature was such that greed, envy, jealousy, they were not allowing me to do anything but fight. So that's why I dragged everybody into the fight. I followed the path of adharma. My selfishness overpowered me, and by hook or crook I tried to grab, and that is why I know what is dharma. I should not have fought this battle. I should not have grabbed, or I should have agreed to some kind of peace. But my nature, quarrelsome nature, my envy, my anger, and all those things made me, forced me, as it were, to do adharma, to practice adharma. So, if it is a combination of all the three gunas of Prakriti which makes us do things, then where is our free will? The only will that works is the will of God. That is what M seems to be telling Girish. Doctor says, they are all trying to convince the doctor who still believes, being a man of science, he thinks one man is independent. I take my own decisions. But now he has come to his senses. So he says, doctor says, okay, I don't say that a person is absolutely free. Then he gives an example which Sri Ramakrishna also used to give. Perhaps he has heard from Sri Ramakrishna. A cow is tied to a post and it is free only as far as the rope allows. The pull of the rope. I mean, he is just about to tell the story of a cow. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that this story explains that though it appears that one has a free will, ultimately, from the ultimate standpoint, it is only God who has got the free will. Then, what is this free will? What is that illusion that we feel when we think we are acting freely? We are free, we are able to take our own decisions. When we think like that in the gross, when we are not really when we have not really surrendered to the Lord and make actual freedom is to surrender totally to the wish, to the will of God, to make your will one with the will of God, because only God's will is free. As long as we are gross, as long as we are bound by Prakriti, our will is not free. But Prakriti gives us a feeling. Otherwise, why will we think that we are free? Many people think we are free to do whatever we like. We are rich, we can spend the money, we can donate the money, or we can just put it in the bank. You see, I am free. So that is what the doctor is also saying. But he also says that I am free like this cow. The cow has a limited freedom. It is free to move as long as the rope allows him. But when the rope is stretched to the maximum, then only God has to come, or only the owner has to come and lengthen the rope and give him some little more freedom. So now it is 10 meters. So in that 10-meter radius, he can the cow the cow, she can eat the grass. But if the owner feels that it has already eaten the grass in this 10-meter radius, it may even the owner may even he may even increase the length to 20 meters. Then the rope becomes long, and then the cow has more freedom to eat the grass. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna used to say, cow is tied to the post, is free only till the rope allows it. So, but Sri Ramakrishna now explains what free will is. Now, these people were discussing. Dr. Sarkar and Girish were discussing about free will and the will of God. Now, Sri Ramakrishna was listening all the while, and now he is giving his answer. Sri Ramakrishna says, Jadu Malik also gave this illustration. So, Sri Ramakrishna had this honesty. He always believed, whenever he quoted something or told some story, he said, he used to give the credit to the person who told him. So Jadu Malik must have given this illustration of a cow tied to the post. And to the younger Naren, is it in some English book? I mean, Jadu Malik and the younger Naren perhaps had read this in a book and told this to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna liked this wonderful illustration that a cow is tied to the rope, and only the owner can make the rope longer and give him more freedom. So ultimately, the free will is only of God. Our free will is just like the free will of the cow, which is restricted by the rope. So, but Sri Ramakrishna says, Jadu Malik told me, and Sri Ramakrishna combined or tried to compare it with this free will, limited free will, and God's free will. So, and then he said, he asked Naren, perhaps you told me that it is in some English book which they had read. Now he is telling the doctor, he is giving his final verdict. Sri Ramakrishna, till now he was listening what M said, what uh, Girish said, and what Dr. Sarkar said. But now he is looking at the doctor and telling him, look, it is God who does everything. I mean, he's trying to tell that it's God's will that is everything. He is the operator and I am the instrument. If you can have this faith, then you will become liberated in this very life. So he's telling the secret of freedom. Liberation means being free from the bondage of Prakriti. How to be free from the bondage of Prakriti? There's only one way, to think my will is God's will. Only God's will work. Then you see there are so many wonderful advantages. The anxiety, the tension, the concept of what is duty, what is not duty, all these things become insignificant. Not that they don't trouble us, as long as we don't fully surrender our will to the Lord. Till then, a little bit of kacha ami will always remain. That ego will always be there. Ego is so difficult to get rid of. So I feel that I have the free will, so I take my decisions. It's fine. Sri Ramakrishna says, don't do it, don't bother about it. But at the same time, you have to attach your will, make your ego pakami, that is a ripe ego. What do you mean by ripe ego? That my will, I am trying to uh, combine it with God's will, or my will is not independent of God's will. So God's will happen. As the Muslims say, Inshallah. If it is Allah's will, it will happen. So that is the idea behind all religions. Even Jesus said that it is I who do everything. So we have to just surrender to our Ishta, to the Lord. And because by the Lord we mean it is the universal mind or the universal ego or the universal force, which is, or the universal mind of which we are parts. So we have free will because we appear to have a free will because we think our egos are real. But in the ultimate, if you see ultimately, it is the Lord's will that alone that works. And He is a wise man who can become liberated in this very life, Sri Ram Krishna says, who understand this concept thoroughly, that it is the Lord's will. Uh, he is the driver and I'm just an instrument. He is the person who is running the machine of my life. You, God, do your own work, but people say they are doing it. So one famous poem, Tomar karma tumi koroma loke bole kori That is a Shakali tomar icha. Everything is your will. There's a beautiful poem Sri Ramakrishna used to like that. Shakali tomar icha mahi tara tumi. Tomar karma tumi koroma loke bole ami kori. So people say that I am doing that work. Loke bole ami kori. People seem to feel or they feel that they are doing it, but actually you are doing your work. Our wills are limited. That is what Sri Ramakrishna says. God does his own work. Then he gives an example. This is a wonderful example which Sri Ramakrishna has given. Do you know how it is? There is a beautiful illustration in the Vedanta. Of course, he has heard it from somewhere, maybe in one of the Shankaracharya's commentaries. So some of his teachers, that people who came to talk with him, like Bhairavi Brahmani, Totapuri, they must have quoted this. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says there is a beautiful illustration in Vedanta. It is not his own, but he has heard it and he is trying to tell us. Rice is being cooked in a pot. Potatoes and eggplant have been put in it with it. After a while, the potatoes and eggplant began to jump up and down as though they were proud of themselves. And they seemed to be saying, I am moving, I am jumping up and down. When the young children see it, innocent children, they think that the potatoes, rice, and eggplant are alive and they are jumping up and down. But their elders who know better explain, they tell the children, ignorant people, so also a prophet tells or a saint tells the ignorant people, devotees, that it is the Lord who is doing. Just as here, young children think that the potatoes, the rice, and the eggplant are alive and jumping. When they see the motion, they think they are jumping on their own. But the elders say, they explain that the potatoes, eggplant, and rice are not animate. They don't jump up and down by themselves. The moment you remove the burning log from under them, they stop moving. So there is a big log, there is a fire, and that fire burns, that fire heats the water, boils the water, and when it gets, when it starts boiling, the things that you put inside, the potatoes, the rice and eggplant, they start jumping. And we feel that it is the potatoes and the eggplants and the rice which has got which are animate. They can jump out, but it is the moment you remove the fire, the water cools down and the potatoes, they become steady. The potatoes and the other things that have been put into the water. So I am the doer. This pride of man is the result of ignorance. So people are powerful only by God's power. Everything becomes quiet when you pull that burning log. So if the God's grace is withdrawn, it is like pulling the burning log from under the pot. The moment you remove it, these potatoes and all become helpless. They don't start moving anymore. So Sri Ramakrishna gives that example, and he also gives another examples of a puppet show. Puppets dance beautifully when their strings are in the hands of a puppeteer. But the moment the strings fall from his hands, they can't move. So puppets, They are active, they seem to be active, they seem to have a free will, as long as the person who is the puppeteer, he moves his fingers and makes them dance, makes them walk, makes them do many things. So everything is possible as long as the thread and the puppeteer is there. But otherwise, the puppets are inanimate things. They'll just fall and they'll be still. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says, as long as you have not seen God, as long as you have not touched the philosopher's stone, you remain under the delusion that you are the doer, that you are doing right or doing wrong. So till then, one has to have discrimination. That is why Vijnana or awakening of the Buddhi enables you to partly do the work of God, that is to do the right thing and avoid the wrong thing. That discrimination is possible only if the mind, if the ego or the chitta assumes the form of the buddhi, they become one. So the buddhi develops, there is pure sattva. When does it happen? When sattva increases. Sri Ramakrishna will mention that now soon. The feeling of distinction is God's maya, and it is necessary to run his world of illusion. So it says it is by the will of God that this distinction he has created. Some people are full of ego, they get stuck. Some people are delusion and they go on doing wrong things because of the rajas and tamas, predominance of rajas and tamas in their constitution. But there are people who are sattvic. They know that it is not our will, through our will, that these things are happening. It is because of God's will. And they trying to align their will with God's will. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says, this distinction is God's maya and it is necessary to run his world of illusion. So this world of illusion that we see in front of us is God's drama or God's leela. But by taking refuge in the maya of knowledge, maya of knowledge means vidya maya. As I told you, maya can bind you, maya can free you also. So that maya which binds you, which takes you towards more and more gross and takes you away from the Vijnanamaya kosha. It goes towards the, gravitate towards the pranamaya and the pranamaya, manomaya. Of course, manomaya is there, the reactive mind, and also the lower body, annamaya kosha. Annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya, as long as your ego, the maya, the avidya maya, is nothing but holding on to these three things as real. Whereas Vidya Maya is trying to hold on to higher things as real, and God alone or Satchidananda Brahman alone is real. So by taking that road, by taking refuge in Maya, the same Maya which binds is the Maya that frees you also. That is why when we pray to Shakti, we have the different bijas which are different sound symbols representing the Vidya Maya. So in a mantra, the Bij mantra is the symbol of, or is the representation of the Vidya Maya, not the Avidya Maya. So we have to cancel the effects of Avidya Maya by this japa. That is one of the ways. In Tantras, they believe that the name itself has an intrinsic power to remove all the sorrows which are caused by ignorance. Sorrows are caused by ignorance, nothing else. So by taking refuge in the mantra, in the Maya of knowledge, that is Vidya Maya, like repeating the mantra, praying, reading of scriptures, and meditating on the Ishta, and all those things, repeating the God's name, they are all fall within the realm of Maya. They are also Maya, but to go beyond Maya, you need the help of Shakti or the help of Prakriti, who appears to us as Shakti, as the all-powerful representation of Brahman himself. So Brahman, when it becomes active, the Satchidananda, the pure consciousness, when it becomes active, it takes the form of Prakriti and interacts, we interact with that. He who realizes God, who gets his vision, he alone can cross over his Maya. Now, one who has aligned himself to the Buddhi, and that Buddhi has become so sattvic that he has a vision of God, this kind of experience of God. He alone can cross over his Maya. He will not be bound to the world by the Avidya Maya, the lower Maya. God alone is the doer, I do nothing. Something who has this faith becomes liberated in this very life. So again is giving the importance to self surrender, as we read in the Gita. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tam sarva papebhyo uh, mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. So I will give you moksha, I will liberate you in this very life if you think that God alone is the doer and I do nothing. That means in effect we reduce our ego to such an extent and retain the Vidya Maya, with the help of which, with the help of Buddhi and the Vidya Maya, through proper discrimination, proper sadhana, we can get liberated in this very life. So now we come to what Girish now. I said this to Keshav Sen. So Sri Krishna is telling that I told this to Keshav Sen, that don't depend too much on free will. Uh, it is only the will of God. Try to align, surrender your will to God's will. Then you will find that not only will you be helped by Vidya Maya to get rid of or get liberated, but at the same time, you'll find your life much more joyful and peaceful. But if we think it is our will and we insist and our ego becomes prominent, our reactive mind, manas, becomes prominent, manomay kosha becomes very prominent, then we have to suffer the consequences. So Girish now tells the doctor, free will, how do you know it exists? According to Girish, because he has surrendered everything to Thakur, he says, how do you prove the existence of that, even that small free will which is there? Doctor says, not by reason. I can't reason about it, but I feel it. I really feel that I have my individual will, just as you feel it is all God's will. Girish says, but I and others feel it otherwise. So it is fine. Whatever you feel to be true, all are laughing here, but it's not a joke. Here the doctor says, I don't have to explain the reason that free will exists. I feel it. And I am doing that. I am uh, doing all my actions with the idea that my will is free. I feel it. But Girish says others feel that it is, they don't have a free will. Everything God decides. So everybody laughs. Then the doctor says, now tries to explain. There are two elements to duty. Now he says what he believes as what is duty. There are two elements to duty. One, I go out to work out of a sense of duty. That is, he feels that he is in this profession, so he has to go out and do his work. Two, I find pleasure in it. But initially, I don't perform duty in the hope of pleasure. So he says there are two elements to duty. One is that I do it because I have to do it. I don't, I do it even if it does not give me pleasure. And secondly, it may give me pleasure later on, and I might be inclined to think that though now there is pain, then now there is trouble, whatever duty I do, ultimately it will give me pleasure. So initially he says, I don't perform duty in the hope of pleasure. I don't make it, try to uh, convince myself that this will give me pleasure and then only I will do. Even if it gives me pain, I do it if I feel, because I feel it is my sense of duty. So he says, when I was a child, he says, I noticed. Now he's giving his own example. You see how interesting this example is. He says, when I was a child, I noticed that the priest was very worried to see ants on the sandesh to be offered. Normally when you offer any sweets, the pujari or the person who offers, he insists that it is clean, that no dog or cat or crow or even ants have come and defiled it. If once, or even the human beings, if somebody has taken a piece, then you can't offer it to God. So also, doctor says that once I saw that some sandesh was being offered, and the thought of the priest was worried. He did not, no doubt everybody who sees sweets, their mind is full of pleasure. But he showed some worry because he saw, oh, there are a lot of ants already. If I can't offer this. So even though there was a sweet, there was a pleasure principle behind it. In smiling, he says, instead he felt worried. Then M is trying to think. Now this is all very getting very confusing. So he says it is very difficult to say whether one feels pleasure while doing a duty or thinking of it afterwards. Where is free will if action is impelled by pleasure? Then he says, in either case, pleasure should not be the motive of our willpower. Because if we that is the motive, then then uh, and even if it is painful, as Dr. Sarkar says, I don't do a duty because it gives me pleasure. I don't even care. My mind tells me I like it, I want to do it, I do it even if it is painful. But later on it might give pleasure or may not give, doesn't matter. So that's what M is also saying. So now the next chapter, Sri Ram Krishna is trying to explain through his own example. He tried to convince these people, but seeing that the argument is still going on about the merits and demerits of the idea of duty. Now, in this chapter 5, the conversation is still going on. The heading given is Spontaneous Love of God. Earlier story of his own life, Sri Ramakrishna's attitude of being a servant of God. So, to give the devotees who are present there a clear idea of what he underwent. See, that is the beauty of Sri Ramakrishna. He will not tell you what is logically correct, or he will not even tell you to believe because he says. He says, this is what I experienced and this is what I believed. And if you believe, you take this whatever. But he would not compromise just because some people could not follow certain things, like giving up the word, giving up Kamini Kanchan. He did not compromise. Whether you want to do it or not, that is your will. But I will tell what is true. So he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, now what he, the doctor, is talking about is called devotion without any selfish motive. Now, Sri Ramakrishna has a wonderful insight. He knows basically, though he appears to be a rational person and always doubting spiritual people, he knows inside Mahendra's heart is a wonderful heart, spiritual yearning. So he says the doctor is, what is the doctor talking about? Is called devotion without any selfish motive. So Sri Ramakrishna seems to be supporting him. He said, you don't have to have a special or selfish motive to do any action, the selfish pleasure motive, that this will give me pleasure. You can do it even without whether it gives you pleasure or not. And then he gives a wonderful example. In bhakti, there is one bhakti known as ahetuki bhakti, without any reason. When you like a person, when you love a person, and you don't expect anything from him, then you will, that is known as ahetuki bhakti. We find this, the Sri Ramakrishna loved Naren so much. The love of the Guru towards his disciple in Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. You will find the Vivekananda in the beginning, Naren did not accept Sri Ramakrishna, but still his love was so much. And so, Swamiji says, it is only his love that held me. So that is known as Ahetuki Bhakti. So the same love Sri Ramakrishna had for his mother. So whether mother gave what he wanted or whether she did not give, that love was without any selfish motive. So he says what the doctor is talking about is called devotion without any selfish motive. I don't want anything from Mahendra Sarkar. Now Sri Ramakrishna is saying that I don't want anything from him. I don't want his money. I want nothing, but still I like to see him. This is like Ahetuki Bhakti. This is actually called selfless love. If I derive a little pleasure out of it, how can I help it? That's what he says. I might get a joy. I might get joy on seeing Narendra, on seeing must M and other disciples. But I don't expect, that doesn't mean I expect something from them. The pleasure principle, normally it is explained that if you know there is a jar and it is full of gold coins, and then the idea of the pleasure associated with getting all that, that will make you to do duty. Sri Ramakrishna says no, but there are people who are selfless, who are not selfish, who just like certain people, who like their disciples, who like their guru without any reason. The guru might not give them anything, or the guru might give them something, but they just love their guru because they have no unconditional love for some people or God. So Sri Ramakrishna says that ahetuki bhakti is the main thing in bhakti yoga. But when you have ahetuki bhakti, when you have some kind of liking for somebody, which is not based on something that the other person can give, but by doing that also there is a small pleasure involved. So Sri Ramakrishna says that it does not harm, it's not an attachment. If my love or if my concern for somebody is unselfish, then it cannot be and it should not be called as attachment. I can't help it, I get pleasure out of it, it's fine. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna so beautifully explains ahetuki bhakti. Bhakti without any bargain. Not that I pray I'll do this, you give me this. That becomes barter. That becomes some kind of business. So Ahalya also, who was cursed, she became a stone because of her husband's curse. And then that Ahalya, Rama had to come. But the mm, Rishi took back that Shapa, took back that curse and said, okay, I would condemned her to become a stone out of anger, and that is going to come true. But when the Lord comes to this earth as an avatar, and when his feet touches the stone, Ahalya will be back to normal, back as a human being. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna is referring to here. He says, Ahalya said, Rama, I don't mind even being born as a pig, but I wish for pure love and devotion at your lotus feet. I want nothing else. So Rama had asked Ahalya, what do you want? She says, I don't want anything. Even if I don't get a good birth or a healthy body, I don't care. But I wish for pure love and devotion, and I don't want anything else. So that is what Ahalya told Rama. When Rama said, tell me what do you want? Knowing that she was quite poor, he wanted to perhaps give her something. But then Ahalya says, no, I just don't mind. Even if I am born as a pig, it doesn't matter. Let me just adore you. Let me just have pure love and devotion at your lotus feet. I want nothing else. So Narada went to see Ramchandra at Ayodhya to remind him that he was to slay Ravana. So before, Narada had gone to tell Rama that your duty is to slay Ravana. Little did they know that later on Sita would be taken away. Sita was with Rama at that time, but Narada had just told him that your mission on this earth is to kill Ravana. So Sita became an instrument actually, and Rama had to go in search of him. So Narada went to just tell Rama that you remember in this life you have to slay Ravana. Seeing Sita and Rama, he began to chant their praises. Delighted with his devotion, Ramchandra said, Narada, I am pleased with your chants. Please ask for a boon. So, seeing Sita and Rama, he began to sing their praises. So, Rama asked him, I am very happy because of your wonderful devotion. So, please ask for something. Because he was a king, he could give. Narada says, I am pleased with your chants. Ask Narada, I am pleased with your chants. Ask for a boon. Narada said, Rama, if you must grant me a boon, please grant that I may have pure love and devotion at your lotus feet. And may not your world bewitching Maya enchant me. Let it not enchant me. Your world be avidya Maya, which will bind me. I just want ask two things of you. One, let me have pure love and devotion for you, and the other, that my your world bewitching Maya, which is creating havoc, which is that Maya is not allowing us to be free from bondage. He says, just let that bewitching Maya not enchant me. Rama said, okay, I granted, but you can ask for another boon. Narada then said, I want nothing more. I just want pure love for your lotus feet. So he knew there's nothing worth asking for. We don't know what to ask God What should we ask God? And we asked the wrong thing. That's why Narada was not caught. He was caught unawares. He knew Rama will ask him, but he says, "No, I just want this. Please give me." Because by getting pure love and devotion for Sri Ram Krishna or the Ishta, you get everything. So you don't have to ask for anything else. And that's why Narada says, "I want nothing. I want pure love for your lotus feet." Then he says, it is the same thing with him, the doctor. Pointing to the doctor, Sri Ram Krishna says, he is also of, of the nature of Narada. He doesn't want wealth, honor, and physical comforts. And that was true. He forego many cases. Mahendralal was a good person and Thakur liked him very much. Thakur liked him, though he did not approve of many things. He was very frank. But Sri Ramakrishna liked his frankness and directness. He did not pretend that he was something. Whatever he believed, he said, and whenever he heard certain good things from Thakur, he accepted it also. But he had his own view, and there's nothing wrong. But Sri Ramakrishna says he just wants to see God. He doesn't want wealth, honor, and physical comforts. He wants nothing at all. This is called pure love and devotion. So internally, even Dr. Sarkar, according to Sri Ramakrishna, was a devotee of God, and he was following this ahetuki bhakti, bhakti which does not seek a return. So it does give some sense, some pleasure, but it's not the pleasure of the senses. This pure love and devotion, this love for the feet of the Lord, it may give you a pleasure, but it is not the pleasure of the senses. There's a huge difference. It's the pleasure of devotion to God and his ecstatic love. Shambhu Malik once said when went to visit him, "You come here because you feel happy talking to me." Yes, there is that bit of happiness. Now, it's not just the worshipper's love for God is ahetu bhakti. God's love or the Guru's love for the disciple. So Shambhu Malik, when he said, "You come, Thakur, you come here because you feel happy talking to me," being his Guru or being the Ishta, Sri Ramakrishna himself went to Shambhu Malik. And Shambhu Malik had so much faith. He said, "You come here because you feel happy talking to me." Yes, there is that bit of happiness. So Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, and without happiness, why will doctors and all this Dr. Sarkar coming to me? There is a bit of happiness which he gets. That is fine. But there is a state higher than this. Sri Ramakrishna says, don't stop. When one wanders around aimlessly like a child, perhaps just to catch a grasshopper. Now, this is a very, very, very important thing to understand. That we sometimes go to certain people because we feel happy. But at the same time, Sri Ramakrishna says there is a higher state when one wanders around aimlessly like a child. When Swami Vivekananda was wandering, it's a beautiful phase of his life. The Parivrajaka, if you read the whole biography, you will find that life of Parivrajaka was the happiest portion of his life. Whenever we are alone, whenever we are free and we wander around aimlessly, some great uh, joy or great bliss we start feeling, but we don't understand what it is. Whereas Sri Krishna says if it is done consciously, there is a higher state than this, than just having happiness, talking to certain people. When one wanders around aimlessly like a child, perhaps just to catch a grasshopper. So that kind of freedom, that freedom from bondage, has different gradations, and wandering around aimlessly like a child, not with their ego, not with a kind of arrogance, but with the egoless simplicity of a child, with that curiosity. If you wander around, then it takes you to greater and greater spiritual level. So to the devotees, Sri Ramakrishna now says, do you understand his doctor's attitude? What he does is doctor's attitude. He says, he has the right inclination. He plays that, "Oh Lord, give me the right inclination so that I won't be tempted to do any wrong." So that is his prayer. He says, "I don't know what is right, what is wrong, but you please." That means we pray. That is the essence of Gayatri Mantra. Gayatri Mantra says, "Dhi Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo devasya dhimahi dhiyo yo na prachodayata. O Lord, O Son, God, please give me dhi or the buddhi. Let my buddhi be sharp enough. Let it be so sattvic that it chooses the right thing and discards the wrong thing, so that I won't be tempted to do any wrong thing. So that is the prayer which one should pray. That's the best prayer. Oh Lord, help me that I have devotion to your feet and I get the right inclination. Like Sri Krishna says, doctor has this. He had the inclination. He, because of his prayer or because of his intense yearning and desire for spiritual life, somehow this he was he could not be he was not taking any wrong decisions in our life. So when we find it difficult to choose between Shreya and Preya, we sometimes it becomes really troublesome. We don't know whether we should opt to do this or that. The problem of making choice is so difficult that uh, Duryodhana had to say, and that depends a lot on our samskaras, on our nature. That is why we have to develop our buddhi, so that buddhi, the developed buddhi, can take a better decision than the reactive manas. Reactive manas has a tendency to make mistakes. We will be tempted to do wrong. And as Duryodhana said, Janami dharmam nachame pravrut, it's not enough just to have knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. Most of the people who do wrong, they know what is wrong, but they still do it because their nature compels them to do it. So also good. We do good because our nature compels us to do good. So that's why Sri Krishna says, it is better to surrender and ask the Lord to choose for us, so that we do the right thing the right time, take the right decision. So Sri Krishna says, I also felt this state. It is called the attitude of a servant. I used to cry, Mother, Mother, so desperately that people would gather around me. So he used to consider his Ishta so real, and he would expect Mother to come and tell him what he should do, what he should not do. When I was in that state, something strange happened. Somebody brought a prostitute to his room to tempt me and cure me of my madness. Sri Krishna says somebody went to the extent, he said, because he is not married, he is getting this problem, he should be dragged down to the world. And with that false idea, they even tried such a stupid thing. But because Sri Krishna had surrendered to the Divine Mother, he said she was a beautiful woman with pretty eyes. I ran out of the room crying, Mother, Mother, shouting for Haladhari. I said, Brother, come see who has entered my room. I told him and others about that woman. In this state, I used to weep, crying, Mother, Mother, save me. Mother, purify me so that my mind does not go from truth to untruth. Then he tells the doctor, this attitude of yours is good. It is the attitude of a devotee, the attitude of a servant of God. So, in that case, when you have delegated your entire responsibility, whether you should do the right thing or the wrong thing to the mother, to the mother, that our will has been combined with that of mother, then mother will ensure that we take the right decision. So, when these people tried to tempt him, Sri Krishna, by sending a prostitute to his room, he was saved because mother allowed him, or mother helped him to take the right decision. So he always depended on the mother. So as he used to say, a person who always depends on God always depends on the free will of God, and then he never takes a false step. He always takes the right step. And then he says, if someone is pure in character, he thinks only of God. He likes nothing else. Some people are born with pure sattva because of their past actions, prarabdha. So, if somebody is pure, he thinks only of God. If he is full of sattva, if his buddhi has been awakened, then even if he is in the worst of circumstances, he will always think of God, he will think of high things. By striving to act selflessly, one attains pure sattva. So when we unselfishly do certain things as a witness, we go on doing good without any motive, ahetuki, or go on praying without any motive, then all our past actions, the rajas and tamas goes, and only sattva remains, and then our character thinks or likes only to think of God. When sattva is mixed with rajas, the mind is diverted to lower things, to worldly things. But one is possessed by the vanity of doing good to the world, even to do good to the world out of ego. Many people develop that idea that I should do this, I should do that. So, but if he doesn't, if he's not able to do it unselfishly or selflessly, then it is better not to do, because again he will get bound by rajas and tamas. It's not as bad as tamas as a selfish person, but trying to do these different, doing good to the world, it is difficult for the ordinary person to do good. However, there is no harm in working selflessly to do good. It's very good for a person to try to do good without any return in this way, but it isn't possible for everybody. It is very difficult. Of course, everybody has to work. Only a few can give up work altogether. So if one has to do work, then one has to do it selflessly, trying to be unselfish and try to do this work as an offering to God, which is the best way to do it. Only a few can give up the work altogether. Pure sattva is found only in a very few, Sri Ramakrishna says. But when a person works selflessly, the quality of sattva mixed with rajas gradually turns into pure sattva. It's only when one has developed pure sattva that he realizes God through his grace. And then he says, an ordinary person can't understand the state of pure sattva. Him once said to me, well, my dear priest, isn't the aim of life to earn name and fame in the world? Don't you think so? And Sri Ramakrishna concludes. So we will also conclude. He says, unless there is a grace of God, he will not understand this idea of pure sattva, the need for spiritual practice, the need to worship God. Because then he says, Hem was one of the acquaintances of Sri Ramakrishna. He used to come and tell Sri Ramakrishna, don't you think the aim of life is to earn name and fame in the world? Don't you think so? So Sri Ramakrishna is trying to conclude that different people have different attitudes, and if he has more of rajas and tamas, then he will have other ideals. He will not, an ordinary person cannot understand what sattva is. Till by the grace of God, through the grace of God, he can develop pure sattva, and that is attained by enlightening our buddhi, by activating our buddhi, by creating circumstances, by sadhana, by repetition of the mantra and the prayers and all bhakti yoga, or even working unselfishly without any attachment. If you do it continuously over a period of time, the sattva will increase. And he says, uh, as Sri Ramakrishna says, though it is difficult for an ordinary person to understand, but that is what happens. And then he realizes God through God's grace. So we will conclude now. If there is some question, you can ask. Oh, the chat is, somebody has asked a very big question. Yeah. Uh, I'll read the question. It is a very long question. Swami Vivekananda's life was intertwined with Sri Ramakrishna's life. Swami Vivekananda had an analytical mind. He followed reason and logic in every step in his life. But, and it is a significant but, when it came to the question of Sri Ramakrishna, all his reasons, logic, and rationality were apparently lost. This was observed by Professor Max Muller and other eminent persons at that time. When talking about Sri Ramakrishna, it appears that Swami Vivekananda was unable to restrain his emotions. The following statements of Vivekananda need further elucidation. Vivekananda said that if he had said or done something good, it was not him but Sri Ramakrishna did it. If something good came from his lips, he laid no claim to it, it was Sri Ramakrishna. Please explain. Okay. So the first question is here. What you said is right. He uh, um, Swami Vivekananda once said that the role of intellect in one's spiritual life is very limited, and he wished that he was like his master Sri Krishna, who went to the university of nature, of mother, of the divine mother, and got his knowledge directly from experience, not through second hand knowledge which we gain by attending university. He once even said, if there is some medicine which can make me forget, unlearn what I learnt, all the stupid things of which have only increased my confusion, the so-called logic, the so-called rational thinking which took person round and round and round and round in circles, not ending anywhere. We went on. You saw how the conversation was going on. These people, Girish and all, they were just getting confused. What is free will? What is not free will? That is typical of academicians. So academicians have a tendency to think everything rationally, and they believe that unless something is rationally proved, they're so egotistic. They feel nothing, if uh, if something is not rationally proved, I don't believe it. As if their belief, God cares for their belief. Once Sri Krishna said, if you don't believe, I don't care, because he says, I have seen these things, I have experienced God, and if you don't believe, it is your problem, it is not my problem. So that is how Sri Krishna conquered Swami Vivekananda. He was full of ego that I have gone to the university, I have studied Western logic, Eastern logic, philosophy, and he was trying desperately to understand Sri Krishna through his mind. Then he found, when he found that he could give experiences to Swami Vivekananda without any effort, then he could not deny. How can there be such such purity, such love, and such wonderful visions and experiences which he is speaking without even going to school, without even going to school? How can this knowledge come to him? If that is not experience, then what it is? So that's idea that intellect is necessary, because Vijnanamaya Kosha and the Manomaya Kosha is much lower. The skills which we acquire and which makes us feel that we are, it just increases the ego. They may be necessary for our worldly survival, but they have nothing to do. They cannot prove a single word. So that's why Swami Vivekananda once told a lady who was very haughty, very proud of her knowledge, she said, I don't believe what you say. This is not logical. Then said, Madam, what I am. She said, you should be like that, you should be like this. She was not approving of what Swami Vivekananda believed and what he did and how he lived and all those things. Then Swami Vivekananda was a bit upset. Then he said, see, what I am is written on my head, on my brow. If you can't read it, the problem is yours, not mine. So that just made that lady quiet, because she was just continuously pestering him. He says, if a person has seen certain things, that is what Sri Krishna says. I don't want your logic. You may ask me, I may try my best to make you understand in your language. That is okay. Out of grace, the Lord comes down to our level and tries to explain us through parables and through stories, and tries to indirectly tell us that what I say is true. That is why we read the gospel. The gospel is full of such truths. But the experiences which he had, these experiences, he says, when you can also have it, provided you fulfill the conditions. You have the yearning, you have the necessary purity, and you do all the things which scriptures and these great prophets tell you. So that is the first question. So when Swami Vivekananda said that, if he had said something good, it was not him but Sri Krishna. That what he means is, whenever we do anything good, if we use the pure sattvic mind and try to combine it and try to align our higher mind the pure buddhi with the Lord, then we take the right decisions. So Swami Vivekananda says, if I have taken some good decisions, that means I was in a very high state of mind. And Sri Krishna took those decisions. I didn't take them. It was he who did it by inspiring my buddhi. But if I was inspired by my logic, my lower intellect or lower mind, if I was inspired by my lower mind, I would have made mistakes. That's why he said, when I made mistakes, it was I who did it. But when I did not make mistakes, it was Sri Krishna who did it. So it's not just devotion. It is a matter of fact. When we align ourselves with the manas, the lower mind, then we take wrong decisions. But we align ourselves with our buddhi, which is through japa, through connection with God. So that's the whole purpose of our sadhana, to somehow align ourselves, to connect ourselves with the divine, so that our buddhi is awakened and we take the right decisions. It is in this sense, Swami Vivekananda said, that if I have done something good, know it for certain that Sri Krishna has inspired me. And if I have done something bad, or which is not good, or maybe which is not correct, that perhaps is a result of me not depending on him, but taking my own decision, depending on my own intellect and my manas. So that is what he says. And then finally, the second part of your question is, Vivekananda said that Ramakrishna's disciples, including himself, knew very little about Ramakrishna, and if they, including Vivekananda, spent their whole life in religious austerity, they would not know a millionth part of who Sri Ramakrishna was. Yes, that he said because Sri Ramakrishna was pure Sachidananda Brahman himself. So his mind was one with the universal mind. And the other disciples like Swamiji and others, they were Ishwar Kotis. They belonged to the inner circle and they were part of him. They were part, no doubt, they were his companions and they were also very powerful compared to us. But still, he says all the disciples put together would not be able to understand this universal mind. It can be possible only for the Lord himself. So the Lord alone knows what his Leela is. We can expect to be free by his grace, but we can't expect to perform the Leela ourselves, since we are part of this divine play. That is the answer. So there is one question on there is a question that if we do not have free will, can murder or other atrocities be justified? So that there is not a question of, if we don't have a free will, we don't have a free will, but if we think we don't have, but out of arrogance, evil-minded people think they have a free will and they behave as they like. They go after things which they do not really, they may even murder, they may even rob people, they cheat people because they think they have a free will, though they don't have. But if they do it, then they have to bear the consequences. It is as simple as that. One does not get a license to do whatever he likes just because he has a free will. If we don't have a free will, then we will not do this. If we really align our will to that with God's will, then no person can do any bad thing or evil thing. But since we have not aligned our will with the cosmic will or with the God's will, which requires a tremendous amount of purity. When the ego is uh, converted from avidya maya to vidya maya, only then the question of surrendering to his will and becoming part of his will, part that question comes. So now no atrocity or anything can be justified, because if that is true, then uh, I mean, the lower will, these things are manifestations of our lower mind, the manas, the reactive mind. When you go after worldly things, any worldly action, not just murder or atrocities or robbing and even earning wealth, all these things, many things which people foolishly do thinking that that will give them security and stability. Whatever they do, nothing can be justified from the spiritual point of view because they are products of Prakriti. It is our manas which makes us go after that. And naturally, human beings suffer. So, if one does evil, one has to do suffer. Next question is on interfaith harmony. God is one and religions are so many. So, my God is worshipped in church or a mosque, says Swamiji. It is true, yes. It is definitely true. The God whom you worship can be worshipped in any form. So, where you worship Him, how you worship Him, it is your own choice. If you want to worship your God, your conception of God in a church, church is just an occasion. Whether you go to a temple or a church, they are all gross things. They are outer crust of religion. They are not the essentials of religion. But the divinity within, it can be experienced in any place. That's why when Shardananji and all they saw when they visited the St. Paul's Cathedral, they had divine experiences. They had it in temples, they would have it in mosques, anywhere. There's no location because God is beyond all this space, time, and causation. So whether it is God is worshipped in a church or a mosque or a temple, um, your concept of God has to be experienced by you in a unique way. You will experience Him in a unique way. And all the other experiences of other prophets, though they may be different, they are uh, different, you may say, manifestations of the same God. The names and forms are different, but the essence, the spirit, or the consciousness is one. Yes. Now I think the last question. Uh, Yeah. If free will is limited to the extent to rope and cow, what is the purpose of karma? Then who is doing sadhana? Or should it be that my attitude should be that Thakur is doing sadhana through me, but even then I am changing my attitude? No, here there is a bit of confusion. When you say the rope, when you have eaten the grass in within your limited length of the rope, then God Himself, through His grace, as Sri Ramakrishna said, will increase the length of the rope. But first you have to finish. If after you do sadhana, whatever sadhana you can do, you have to have that purushartha, that I have to express my free will, I have to use my will and do japa and sadhana and prayer and other things. But when the results are not there, then God will, by His own grace, the Lord will increase the length of the rope. He will increase your will and you will be able to do more and more sadhana. You can take it that way also. Okay. Is ahetuki bhakti impossible when we are immersed in avidya maya? Obviously. When we are immersed, why immersed? When we even think of avidya maya, now there cannot be ahetuki bhakti. Ahetuki bhakti implies that you are in Vidya Maya. You consider yourself as a child of God or a servant of God. So Sri Ramakrishna clearly mentioned that. If that attitude is there, that it is Lord's will, I am just carrying out whatever He wants me to do. If that faith is there, then it is Vidya Maya. So avidya maya cannot give rise to ahetuki. Ahetuki bhakti is far. Avidya maya is not. Vidya maya is not only an essential condition, but ahetuki bhakti is far more difficult than just pure bhakti for the Lord. With pure bhakti, perhaps one can get His grace, but one needs special grace to have pure unselfish love without any expectation of return. Okay. Oh, we are also in the same state as Duryodhana. So, how do we come out of this? Going to Sat also needs free will. That is what I am saying now. Duryodhana had see, we have that much choice. Duryodhana says that he is helpless, but was he really helpless? Were not people telling him what to do, what is dharma, what is adharma? He did it because prakriti, his prakriti was making him do that. But to change the prakriti, to change the influence of prakriti, we have to do sadhana. So ultimately, you may say going to Sat also needs free will. So that free will God has given us. That rope, as Sri Ramakrishna says, that small part of rope is there. But if we refuse to even eat the grass which is within the radius of our rope, then what can God do? Why will He increase the rope? So if you don't try to get avidya maya, then you will be immersed in avidya maya and eat the fruits and eat the things which are within the limit of the rope. So to do sadhana, first one has to do start with something, and then as you go on in your sadhana, then you will say that you will see that your will is slowly getting attached or aligned to God's will. It is becoming more and more dependent on God's will. Then you don't commit the same mistake as Duryodhana did. He was in fact going in the opposite direction. So how could he get God's grace? Okay, so I take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Namaste, Swamiji. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.